There is a tendency in popular history to characterize famous rulers as either unilaterally good or evil. Characters like Marcus Aurelius are often portrayed as virtuous and wise, while characters like Nero are depicted as twisted and cruel. Rarely does a leader exist in both camps, and yet, in the case of the Islamic world, one Caliph does. This man was Al-Hakim bi-Amr Allah of the Fatimid dynasty. To some, the enlightened philosopher king of Shia Islam, and to others, a mad tyrant responsible for untold cruelty and persecution. In this video, we will examine the life of Caliph Al-Hakim, exploring the Ismaili society he was raised in, and determining how the world remembers him, both as the quintessential enlightened despot and tyrannical dictator of the Islamic world. Such absolute judgments are rarely accurate in real history, but rulers of good and evil certainly exist in fantasy, where you might just be able to become one yourself with the sponsor of this video, War and Order. It's a free-to-play mobile game in a fantasy Middle Ages where you're a lord of a kingdom, among many others, locked in battle with monsters and other players, but also able to ally with those players to even the odds. You'll take huge armies into giant battles with various unit types, and if you succeed, you and your allies will conquer an endless world of empire and imagination. You can work together to stop attacks on your coalition and plan the downfall of your enemies, and the stakes are high. There's an ongoing cross-server war for which player gets to be king, granting massive rewards. Outside of battle, you'll be upgrading your castles, acquiring resources and training your soldiers, even adding beasts and angels to your forces. You can also review replays of prior battles to analyze performance and search for new strategies. Get the game now via our link in the description to score $60 worth of bonus gifts. Just use our code goes here. Today, the Twelver Shi'ism is the most widespread branch of Shia Islam. But during the apex of the Fatimid dynasty's power, Ismailism, another branch of Shia Islam, was the most popular. When the Fatimid state was established in 910, its primary goal was to promote the spread of Ismailism. This was done in part by preaching the rise of a messianic figure, Al-Mahdi, who would destroy all tyranny in the world and establish a just and peaceful order. This powerful message ensured significant support for the Fatimids in the Islamic world, but also brought a huge burden of expectations. As various Fatimid rulers failed to dislodge the Abbasid usurpers or defeat the Byzantine infidels, their empire gradually turned into an ordinary state with its own problems and challenges amidst unfulfilled expectations of the return of Al-Mahdi. Amongst these challenges was social and religious friction. The majority of the people ruled by the Fatimids were still Sunni, and the influence of Christians and Jews in the administration of the empire was causing major discontent among them. Moreover, there was a major rivalry between the Al-Maghariba, the native Berbers of North Africa, and Al-Mashariga, the Turks and Daylamites in the Fatimid army. It was amidst these troubles that the 6th Imam, Caliph Al-Hakim, started his reign in 996 at the age of 11. Born as Al-Mansur, he was the first Fatimid ruler to be born in Cairo, the seat of Fatimid power since they had conquered Egypt. Al-Hakim faced trouble right at the beginning of his reign. On the day of his coronation, the leader of the Khatama Berbers, Al-Hasan ibn Ammar, demanded the dismissal of the Christian Wesiter of the Fatimid Empire, Isa ibn Nestorus, in favor of his own chosen appointment to the position. Al-Hakim did not have any other choice but to accept this demand. During early Fatimid expansion, the North African Berbers had been the principal power behind the state, but later they started facing competition from Turks and Daylamites in the Fatimid army and Christians in the state administration. To restore his people's lost influence, Ibn Ammar immediately started appointing his kin to important military and administrative positions. Major privileges, such as precedence at official ceremonies, vast sums of money, slaves, properties, and horses were granted by the state to the Khatama Berbers. This naturally caused discontent among the rest of the Fatimid elite. One of those unhappy with the situation was Bajawan, the tutor of Al-Hakim, and a eunuch with vast experience of governance and palace intrigue. He contacted Manjutakin, the Turkic governor of Fatimid-controlled Damascus, persuading him to move against Ibn Ammar and restore the Imam Caliph's rule in the empire. Manjutakin moved towards Egypt with some 6,000 men. Ibn Ammar countered by sending the Berber commander Sulayman ibn Falah with 10 to 15,000 men against Manjutakin. In the ensuing battle, the Berbers were victorious. Despite this, seeing court intrigue slowly tilt against him, Ibn Ammar tried to make his political approach more inclusive, but this would prove to be his undoing. When he dismissed Jaysh ibn al-Samsa, the Berber governor of Tripoli, Jaysh and several Kutama chiefs allied with Bajawan against him. This was a crack in the united front of al-Maghriba. Bajawan incited riots in Cairo in 997, which ultimately led to Ibn Ammar going into hiding. With his main political enemy eliminated, Bajawan restored stability in the empire by pacifying the Berber elite, ensuring the return of their looted property and promising security for them. Thereafter, the eunuch became de facto ruler of the Fatimid Empire. But Al-Hakim was growing restless with the increased influence of his former teacher. Several sources note that Bajawan continued treating Al-Hakim as a child and several times disrespected him in the palace. In March of 1000, Bajawan was killed in a plot organized by Al-Hakim. Now 15 years old, Al-Hakim was ready to rule himself, which he would do unchallenged for the next 21 years. To avoid civil turmoil like that caused by Bajawan and Ibn Ammar, the Caliph appointed 15 different wasitas in this period, so no one vizier was in office long enough to gain enough power to oppose him. These wasitas were drawn from the empire's Christian population, or the Caliph's personal slaves, so as to deny the influential position to the caste of Fatimid elites who had traditionally dominated it. Before talking about various aspects of Al-Hakim's reign in the Fatimid Empire, let us briefly describe his character according to his contemporaries. Chroniclers have described him as both ruthless and generous, both as brave and cowardly, both as a tyrant and just ruler. His voice was apparently so powerful that in one anecdote he once shouted at a man who died on the spot from fright. We need to approach all such accounts with a grain of salt, as often Shia chroniclers would glorify him, while Sunni and Christian accounts demonized him. With that said, let us now examine deeds that created such a polarizing figure. Ismaili dawah, ego proselytizing, was always a key factor behind Fatimid expansion, but it gained more prominence during Al-Hakim's reign. Previously, dawah was mostly assigned to Qadi, the chief judge of the empire, but Al-Hakim decided to establish a separate position for this purpose called Da'i al-Duat. This person was in charge of training Da'is, Ismaili missionaries, who would be sent to different corners of the Muslim world to spread the Ismaili version of Islam and invite people to recognize Al-Hakim as the rightful ruler of the Ummah. During Al-Hakim's reign, the foundation of Dar al-Ulum or Dar al-Hikmah, the House of Science or the House of Wisdom, in 1005 enabled improved training of a higher number of Da'is, and in general turned Cairo and the Fatimid Empire into one of the centers of education in the Muslim world. While the primary purpose of Dar al-Hikmah was to ensure a higher quality of Da'is training, it also became a major university, attracting people from all over the Islamic world, teaching subjects like medicine, astronomy, languages, mathematics, philosophy, and Muslim theology. Al-Hakim, who proved himself a consummate patron to scholars, would sometimes attend the sessions of Dar al-Hikmah personally and engage in discussions. The young Imam Caliph took steps to enhance the knowledge on Ismaili dawah among his own subjects as well, who were still mostly Sunni. Special public sessions were held for ordinary people, including women, who were given a chance to become Da'is as well in order to proselytize among other women, and perhaps more importantly, their children. During the reign of Al-Hakim, it looked as if the dawah were the primary weapon of struggle against the traditional Sunni caliphs, the Abbasids. In 1010, the discontent of the Shia population in the heart of the Abbasid Empire, Iraq, led the Uqaylid governor of Mosul, Anbar, and Kufa to recognize Al-Hakim as the sovereign of these territories. In the same year, the chief of the Banu Asad tribe pledged allegiance to Al-Hakim and recognized him as the ruler of Hilla. But since Al-Hakim was unable to support these developments with military force, the Abbasids quickly regained control over these areas. Until the end of his reign, a cold war between the Fatimids and the Abbasids developed, as Al-Hakim struggled against his Sunni rivals to win the allegiance of various rulers in the Islamic world. Diplomacy and bribery was employed by Al-Hakim on several occasions to reach his foreign policy goals. For instance, when the Sharif of Mecca declared himself the Amir al-Mu'minin and refused to read khutbah in Al-Hakim's name, the Imam Caliph used lavish gifts to persuade the dignitaries of Mecca to support his claim over Mecca, which ultimately resulted in the deposition of the Sharif and the restoration of the Fatimid control over the area. But overall, under Al-Hakim, the Fatimid Empire failed to ensure major geopolitical change in the Islamic world. In the early period of his reign, Al-Hakim took up an aggressive anti-Sunni stance. In 1004, he ordered the public cursing of some of the Prophet's companions, who he claimed usurped Ali's right to become the Caliph, including the first 3 Caliphs and Prophet's wife Aisha. Moreover, Al-Hakim instructed these curses to be etched on the walls of all mosques and available public spaces. Obviously, this did not sit well with the majority Sunni population of the Fatimid Empire. Dissatisfaction with these policies pushed some Fatimid subjects to support Abu Rakwa's rebellion in 1005, which almost toppled the Fatimid dynasty. Seeing this, Al-Hakim reversed his anti-Sunni policy in 1008 and publicly praised the previously cursed Sahaba. From then on, Sunnis were able to live in the Fatimid Empire without any fear. But despite the reversal, Al-Hakim's actions could not be undone, and they gave the Abbasids an invaluable source of propaganda. In 1011, the Abbasid Caliph Al-Qadir Billah gathered Muslim theologians to his court, Sunni and Twelver Shia alike, and ordered them to prepare a manifesto which accused the Fatimids of lying about their Alid descent. This was called the Baghdad Manifesto, and was read at all mosques on Abbasid territory during sermons. Just like the Abbasid Caliphate, the Fatimid Empire also had a considerable Christian and Jewish population. Al-Aldama, the people of the book, and their religious views were generally tolerated in the Islamic realm, since they believed in the same Abrahamic God. Al-Hakim, however, initiated a series of persecutions against his non-Muslim subjects, which ultimately would be what earned him his infamous moniker, the Mad Caliph. Despite being naturally disadvantaged on a societal level, Christians and Jews under Islamic rule were often able to prosper. In Fatimid society, they engaged in medicine, banking, financial and public administration, and had major experience in these fields, often making them the best options for various high-ranking positions in the Fatimid Empire. The sources note that when Al-Hakim's father, Al-Aziz, dismissed and arrested his Jewish vizier, Yaqub ibn Kilis, the administration of the state came to the brink of disaster, causing the Imam Caliph to release and reappoint him. Employment of Jews and Christians in such financially rewarding positions made many of them rich. Hence, a general discontent among the Muslim majority emerged regarding the prosperous life of the Christian minority living among them. Some modern historians claim that Al-Hakim's anti-Christian and anti-Jewish policies started right after he took full control over the state administration after the execution of Bajawan, citing the execution of a high-ranking Christian official named Fad ibn Ibrahim, the arrest of several Jewish and Christian clerks, and the destruction of 2 churches in Cairo in 1002. Others argue that these were outlying incidents that do not represent systematic oppression, and Al-Hakim continued the tolerant policies of his father at the beginning of his reign. However, the year 1004 marked the beginning of Al-Hakim's descent into persecution when he began visually segregating his subjects. He ordered almost all Jews and Christians to wear a black garment with black belts in public, following this up with an order for Jews to wear bells and for Christians to wear crosses. He prohibited slaves from being sold to non-Muslims, and in 1007 confiscated all church revenue, putting it under the supervision of the state. It should be pointed out that the chronicler Ibn al-Mukaffar, who was himself a Christian bishop, justifies this by pointing out the ubiquitous corruption and nepotism in the church. Another Christian chronicler, Yahya of Antioch, states that after the governance of churches was improved, the state returned the confiscated money. In any case, the biggest anti-Christian decision by Al-Hakim was his order to destroy the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem in 1009, one of the holiest sites of Christianity. According to Muslim laws, people of the book were prohibited from holding religious ceremonies in public spaces, praying loudly, and ringing church bells loudly. These rules were often ignored in the Fatimid Empire and not punished. Despite his orders on the prohibition of religious parades during Easter and Epiphany, in 1007 the Christians of Jerusalem held a large procession during that holy day. This happened amidst the backdrop of continued social tension, as both wealthy and poor Muslims resented the prosperous life of Christians in the Fatimid Empire. Therefore, anti-Christian policies were the easiest shortcut to popularity for the Imam Caliph. The destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in 1009 enabled Muslim mobs to destroy many other churches in Fatimid territory and to loot their possessions. In 1012, Al-Hakim rubbed salt in the wound when he prohibited Jews and Christians from riding horses, ordering them to use only donkeys or mules with undecorated saddles. They were also prohibited from riding on boats with a Muslim crew or taking Muslim girls as concubines. Moreover, the breeding of pigs and selling of wine and beer was prohibited. These discriminatory policies, and most importantly, the destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, won Al-Hakim the moniker Mad Caliph in the Christian world. With that said, it is interesting that despite his anti-Christian policies, during Al-Hakim's reign, there was no military conflict with the Byzantines, who had been fighting a border war with the Fatimids for decades. Even the destruction of the Holy Sepulchre did not cause a conflict, as evidently neither side trusted that their respective militaries were capable of achieving any major success against each other. Meanwhile, in his religious fervor, or on the quest to gain more popularity among his Muslim subjects, Al-Hakim severely restricted access to barley, dates, honey, grapes, raisins, and any other fermentable fruits. Eating fish without scales was forbidden. In an attempt to curb prostitution, he forbade women from going outside of their homes, with widows, midwives, and court witnesses, and women preparing for pilgrimage being some of the few exceptions to this rule. Some of the prohibitions ordered by Al-Hakim were truly ridiculous. It's tough to see why he, for instance, banned playing chess. On 2 occasions, dogs were massacred in Cairo, possibly as an anti-rabies policy. Towards the end of his reign, Al-Hakim became more and more ascetic, which made him appear more mysterious and down-to-earth, aiding his image as a just but divine ruler. Before, Al-Hakim was a very hands-on ruler, who would frequently walk in the city and talk to commoners, listening to their grievances and petitions. But later on, his public appearances became extremely rare. He refused to ride horses, and only used donkeys for transportation. He wore ordinary clothes, and was accompanied by only a few servants. Al-Hakim would make frequent trips to Mount Muqtafam, where he would pray alone through the night. It is on this somber note that the reign of the Mad Caliph comes to a quiet end. On the 13th of February 1021, Al-Hakim went to Mount Muqtafam once more, and this time he never came back. The search party found his donkey and clothes, but there was no trace of Al-Hakim. Some claim that he was killed by his half-sister Sit al-Mulk over the complex issue of succession. Others look for more mysterious causes, such as occultation. We still don't know the exact reason for his death. Al-Hakim is the most prominent Fatimid Imam Caliph. Such was the level of his reverence among his supporters that after his death, some Ismailis created a new religion, the Druze faith, which saw Al-Hakim as the manifestation of God on earth. Such was the level of hatred towards him that he was called a mad Caliph. He was a controversial ruler who would both discriminate against Christians and Jews and reward them for good public service and appoint them as wasitas. Where one day he would order the cursing of major personalities of the Sunni theology, another day he would call for the resolution of all religious disputes through civilized discussion and academic argumentation. He was compared to Nero and was blamed for the burning of Fustat, but he also turned his capital Cairo into the center of science and academia in the Islamic world. His mysterious death only added to the colorful personality of the Fatimid Imam Caliph Al-Hakim bi-Amr. More videos on Islamic history are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.